Welcome, my friends. In this video, we'll explore the first chapter, Don't Try, unveiling the secrets of self-discovery. Then, get ready to challenge conventions in the second chapter, where we redefine happiness as a problem. Join me on this extraordinary journey of personal growth and unlock your fullest potential. Bring your favorite drink and let's enjoy together. The first chapter of the book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, by Mark Manson, is titled, Don't Try. In this chapter, Manson argues that our culture is obsessed with positivity and success, and that this obsession can actually be harmful. He suggests that people are often told to just try your best, or you can do anything you set your mind to, but this mindset can actually set us up for failure. When we inevitably encounter obstacles and setbacks, we feel like we've failed because we didn't try hard enough. Manson argues that instead of trying to always be positive and successful, we should embrace the idea of failure and be willing to suffer for what we truly care about. He says that we should focus on what's truly important to us and not waste our time and energy on things that don't matter. The chapter also introduces the concept of the feedback loop from hell. This is the idea that when we focus too much on our negative thoughts and emotions, they become more powerful and overwhelming. Manson argues that we should accept our negative emotions and learn to live with them, rather than trying to avoid them or suppress them. Mark Manson began this chapter with a story about a person named Charles Bukowski, who was a poet and writer. According to Mark, this character was an embodiment of failure because Charlie was addicted to alcohol and women. He was a burden and a liability to society. Charlie desperately tried to become a famous writer and poet, but unfortunately, all his writings were completely rejected. Every time he submitted his work to any outlet, it faced rejection. His writings and compositions were very poor, and all his attempts to succeed ended in failure. The more he failed, the more he immersed himself in the world of alcohol and debauchery. He remained in this state for over 30 years, and after surpassing the age of 50, he decided to surrender to this situation and admit that he was a failure. As soon as he acknowledged his failure, he began practicing his hobby of writing and composing while continuing to indulge in the world of alcohol and debauchery. By chance, he received an offer from a publishing house that saw the spirit of struggle in him, and they offered him this opportunity out of pity for his situation. Although the offer presented to him was less than his income from the job he was working in, he decided to resign from the job that had become suffocating for him. After joining the publishing house, his first compositions, although simple, received a remarkable reception, achieving the success he had been seeking for 30 years. Interestingly, after Charlie's death, the phrase, "Do not attempt," was written on his grave. The lesson from this story, my dear reader, is that we must acknowledge failure and accept it. After this story, Mark moved on to explain the concept of the hell loop. Imagine, my dear reader, that you quickly get angry about trivial things, and you start thinking about your anger and wondering why you get angry so quickly. Then you get angry at yourself for getting angry quickly. This is what Mark referred to as the hell loop. Every person who experiences this hell loop is a natural human because the only creature that contemplates its thoughts is the human being. For example, when you enter social media platforms and see everyone living a happy life, you start blaming yourself and saying that you are a failed person, and you fall into a cycle of depression. You feel sadness because you are sad, and you feel anxiety because you worry. That's why we need to reconcile with ourselves and our reality, and admit that life consists of a duality of good and bad things, and that life is not ideal. Therefore, my respected friend, you need indifference in this life and not to give more attention to matters than necessary. Some people may not understand what Mark means in this chapter and may think that he is saying it is not necessary to succeed, be positive, and strive to achieve your goals and dreams. Mark's intention is not that. Mark intends to meet people who strive for idealism and avoid negativity, guilt, failure, as well as feelings of tension, anxiety, and fear. Overall, the chapter encourages readers to be honest with themselves about what truly matters to them, and to let go of the pressure to always be positive and successful. By embracing failure and accepting our negative emotions, we can create a more meaningful and fulfilling life. In the second chapter of The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, Mark Manson challenges the conventional belief that happiness should be our ultimate goal in life. He argues that constantly pursuing happiness can lead to dissatisfaction and disappointment. Manson suggests that instead of focusing on the pursuit of happiness, we should embrace the struggles and problems that come along with it. Manson highlights the concept of the backwards law, which states that the more you try to be happy and avoid suffering, the more you end up feeling discontented and trapped. He emphasizes that true happiness and fulfillment come from accepting and confronting life's difficulties head-on. Throughout the chapter, Manson shares personal anecdotes and provides thought-provoking insights about the nature of happiness. He encourages readers to shift their perspective and understand that happiness is not a destination to reach but rather a byproduct of living a meaningful and purpose-driven life. Mark Manson began this chapter with a story about a prince that dates back over 2,500 years. The story goes like this. The father of this prince decided to make his son live a happy life free from suffering, where he wouldn't experience any kind of pain. So, as soon as this prince was born, his father built walls around the palace and assigned guards and servants whose orders were to prevent the prince from leaving the palace. His father provided him with everything he desired, and the prince lived a very happy childhood inside the palace until he reached adolescence. At that point, the prince decided to explore the world outside the palace. One day, he decided to collaborate with one of the guards in order to leave the palace. Eventually, he managed to escape, and he witnessed the real world, a world that contained both good and evil, health and illness. He saw homeless people, and others who killed and stole. He witnessed many things and facts that he couldn't comprehend because he had lived his entire childhood confined within the palace, where he was provided with everything by his father. After witnessing all these things outside the palace, his suffering increased, and he returned to the palace. He started blaming his father for making him live only one side of the life experience. Then he made the final decision to leave the palace for good and live the other side of his life. He chose to live a life of poverty, suffering, and homelessness. He slept on the streets and ate leftover food. He experienced poverty in its harshest form. After some time, he washed himself and wore new clothes, then sat under a tree contemplating the life he had lived in the palace and the life he was currently living as a homeless person. He compared between the two and decided not to leave the place where he was sitting until he found all the answers to the questions that were wandering in his mind. Eventually, he reached the correct solution, which was the duality of both worlds. The lesson from this story is that suffering exists in both worlds. He learned that suffering is inevitable whether you are rich or poor. The suffering of wealth may be less than that of poverty, but suffering cannot be avoided. It must be accepted and lived with because in every period of time and social situation, there are problems. For example, when you compare the problems you had in childhood with the current problems, you laugh at them because they seem difficult and significant to you at that time. He also learned that happiness is not an equation that can be applied to guarantee its attainment. Then Mark spoke about a fictional character named the Panda Bear, who imagines being a bear whose mission is to give you the harsh truth, and its purpose is to strengthen you. This bear knocks on people's doors and enters their houses to give them the bitter truth and the flaws of each person. Friend, you should know that suffering is the motivation for positive change, and happiness lies in solving problems, not in their absence. Problems are not solved solely based on emotions, and decisions that you may regret in the future should be approached with logical analysis alongside emotions. Choose the problems you want to experience and solve, and if you want to achieve your dream, you must choose the accompanying suffering. Many of us dream of having a fit body and muscles, but we do not think about the other side of this dream, which is exercise, commitment, dietary discipline, effort, and fatigue in the gym. Therefore, do not waste your time on solving problems unrelated to your dream, and you should ignore them. That's why this book is called The Art of Indifference, not indifference itself.